Once again, thank you for joining us today. We are going to have a webinar on better evaluation and climate change adaptation. It's really great to see everyone participating from across the globe. Everyone, please accept my apologies. I see now that my own mic was on mute, and let's start again. I'll briefly go over our agenda and introduce our speakers and presenters today. I hope that you can see on the presentation slide before you our quick agenda. We are quite new to webinars, so we do appreciate your patience as we go through the technical challenges that we may encounter in this webinar itself, so please bear with us. For today, we hope to have our colleague Roy introduce the challenge question. We will also have Patricia Rogers, the Project Director for Better Evaluation, to frame our discussion today in looking at the challenge with some concepts that we encourage you to keep in mind as we hear from Mai, who will explain the challenge. Mai is the outcome manager with NEDA. Patricia and Olga will jointly share with you how Better Evaluation as a platform has multiple resources to access that's accessible to practitioners as you encounter challenges in developing M&E systems, selecting tools and methodologies. We will then have about 15 minutes to do an interactive audience response session where we will field your questions for Better Evaluation, but also like to hear your feedback on the challenge itself. Before we wrap up the webinar today, Patricia and I will invite you to continue the discussion in Better Evaluation or the C-Change platform. So thank you again for joining us today. I hope that you will find our webinar this morning or this evening, depending on where you are in the world, something that you can identify with and answers that you may be able to apply in your work as well. What I'd like to remind participants is that for the interactive portion of the webinar, please note that there are two ways in which you can participate. You can either raise your hand and I will call on you and open up your mic so that we can hear your voice, or alternatively, if your sound is not working, please type your question into the question pane. And again, for those who are joining the webinar late, the presentation slides as well as the recording of the webinar will be available on the C-Change platform. Unfortunately, our colleague Roy is not able to connect with the sound, but I would like to introduce the challenge question on his behalf. Essentially, what Mai will be describing to you today will be centered on these questions. Is there practicality or utility of consolidating sectoral M&E systems into one unified national framework? And linked to that, what are the concrete steps towards developing it if in fact it is determined to be practical to use a unified framework? And with that, I invite Patricia to share with us your thoughts on framing the challenge.
Thank you. Thanks, Saria, and thank you to everybody for being patient as we to get this technology working. GoToWebinar, like Better Evaluation itself, is a platform to support sharing of our experiences and expertise, and when it works really well, it's fabulous, and when it doesn't, we work through the challenges in that. Before we hear from Mai about the details of the challenge, I wanted to share 4 ideas that we've found very helpful in starting to think about that. The first of these relates to the issue of aggregation. When we're putting together indicators from different sectors, we often have challenges around incommensurable metrics, that there's a real gap between the types of indicators that we have, the levels that we have, and the way that they're framed, the sort of metrics that they're in. And one of the ways to address this is to see if there are some common measures that we can find, particularly when we're looking at using these to assess trade-offs for alternative actions. The second framing idea that I'd like to share with you that also relates to aggregation is when we're in fact putting together very different program theories from different sectors that are talking about different types of outcomes that are being achieved, different ways of achieving them, and some of them where the indicators are focused at quite different levels within that program theory. Some are at the organisational level, some are at behaviour change level, and some are really looking at changes in the environment or the consequences of them. The third idea that we found helpful in framing this issue is the notion of the reporting. For whom is the report? Is it for people who have a lot of technical expertise or people who are directly affected by it in the community? Is it people who are going to be using this along with other data and they have a lot of time to drill down to the details? Or are we talking to people with a very short space of time to have to get the information communicated very quickly? And the fourth idea is a challenge that comes up in all our performance monitoring. How do we balance what's a very precise and valid measure with something that's actually robust and practical and can be made to work? So I'd encourage you to think about these four framing ideas as we hear more detail about the challenge from Mai, and I look forward to hearing your ideas about this shortly. So I'll pass back to Mai now.
Thank you, Patricia. What I will be presenting to everyone is the challenge that my program is handling right now. I'm part of the NDJF Joint Program on Climate Change here in the Philippines, and we have been tasked to come up with or develop sectoral M&E frameworks that integrate climate change as one of its indicators for our priority sectors. So just to be able to contextualize the challenge, what I would like to present to everyone is just a quick overview of our joint program on climate change, and then on the second part of the presentation really delve into the details of the challenge, going through the background, an extensive explanation of the challenge, and what are the next steps that we envision to be able to find solution for this challenge. So just quickly, the MDGF 1656 Joint Program, which is titled Strengthening the Philippines' Institutional Capacity to Adapt to Climate Change, is a 3-year program under the MDGF thematic window of environment and climate change. The joint program is supported by the Spanish government through the United Nations system and is currently being implemented by 9 government agencies, including NEDA, which is the National Economic and Development Authority, the main planning body of the government here in the Philippines, and several sectoral agencies on environment, science and technology, agriculture, trade, labor, health, settlements, and the province of Albay, together with 6 of our UN partners. The joint program is envisioned to achieve 3 outcomes. This is mainstreaming climate change risk reduction in government development plans and processes, enhance the capacities of our stakeholders as well as our sectors to develop, manage, and administer climate change plans, programs, and projects, as well as to improve coping mechanisms through our pilot demonstration adaptation projects towards achieving the outcome of mainstreaming climate change adaptation in governance. We have been tasked, where our program is moving forward in developing CRR adaptation M&E systems for each of our 5 vulnerable sectors. Moving forward in terms of describing the challenge, in 2009, our joint program forged partnerships with centers of excellence. These are state universities and colleges here in the Philippines to develop CRR adaptation M&E systems for our 5 priority sectors, namely agriculture, wherein we partnered with the University of the Philippines in Los Baños, as well as the same partnership was forged for the forest and biodiversity sectors. For our coastal and marine sector, we engaged with the Marine Science Institute, which has been noted to be the leading academic institution in terms of coastal resource management. For the water resources sector, we partnered with the National Institute for Geological Science, and for health, we partnered with the University of the Philippines National Institute for Health. So the strategy was really to partner and link with known experts for these sectors to come up with an adaptation M&E system. The scope of work, or rather the terms of reference for our Center of Excellence, was to go through 3 major activities. The first is to scope existing M&E systems of our sector agencies, try to find out what are the entry points for CRR in this M&E system and how this can be further enhanced to incorporate climate change adaptation and climate risk reduction, and finally develop an enhanced M&E system that includes, of course, indicators as well as implementation strategies that would facilitate its trying to implement, for the M&E system. But what we've discussed with our Center of Excellence is that there are 3 major key considerations for developing the system for each of the sectors. Is that first, it should really build on the existing efforts and the M&E systems of our sector agencies. One of the key principles of the joint program is not to reinvent the wheel, but rather build on existing systems as well as existing efforts. Also, it is important that when we identify the indicators, data availability and the ease of access for these data sets should be considered. One of the hindrances of really implementing an M&E system is that indicators are developed, and this really reflects what it would be able to generate the kind of information policymakers and decision makers would require. However, the data requirements are not there. So in the end, it is unusable. Also, as climate change is a new concept or an emerging concept in terms of governance and how it is related to the day-to-day operations of our agencies, capacity building should be an integral component in terms of implementing these M&E systems. However, in 2010, once we've already developed several of our M&E systems, particularly for health and water, we've observed that there were varying perspectives or levels in terms of the M&E system. Basically, for water, the monitoring system really focused on the physical, sectoral, and project level impacts of climate change, as well as project performance of climate-related projects are the main focus of the system. For health, it focused more on the organizational and program level impacts and performance of climate change adaptation projects. For coastal, it zeroed in essentially on the physical impacts of climate change through the sector. Plus, an additionality is that it also focused on the community level impacts. For agriculture, similarly to coastal and forestry, it focused on the physical and socioeconomic impacts of climate change, both at the household level as well as the community level, but included a monitoring system for the institutional response and adaptive capacities of our sector agencies or whatever government entity is responsible for agriculture and forest resource services. Just to give an example and contextualize what has been developed under the water sector, you can see in your screens a schematic diagram of the proposed M&E and valuation system. So as earlier mentioned, on the first frame in this slide, you can see that the M&E system would intend to measure the physical impacts on water resulting from climate change, then it would move forward in terms of evaluating these impacts, as well as provide recommendations as to how to regularly collect the information and to monitor these changes. For the health sector, I'm sorry, but I think this is quite a slide that which could not provide too much information given the font size. But what the slide really intends to present is that the monitoring system for the health sector focuses more on the physical impacts, as well as trying to look at them. On the third box on your right, you can see there are several adaptation indicators and categories, but all of these relate to programmatic level monitoring. Unique to the health sector is that they came up with a dashboard indicator for climate change, wherein you can see for each of the column it goes to identifying the areas, providing the attendant dashboard indicators. First level and to the third level indicators, it also provides information as well as guidance on what level of monitoring. Is it barangay, which is the smallest unit of government in the Philippines, until to the national level. So as you can see on the screen, P refers to province. It also provides information regarding the frequency of the monitoring. So for example, for climate and environmental parameters, the dashboard indicator is climate change or early warning system. The first level indicator is a 1 degree increase beyond rainfall threshold rather, and a degree increase above temperature threshold should be monitored at the provincial level, and the frequency of monitoring is at a daily basis. So, trying to, considering what I presented earlier, what the program or the joint program is really envisioning is as an exit strategy, we intend to hand over all of these M&E systems for health, water, coastal, agriculture, and forestry to our relevant agencies, both at the sectoral level as well as to the national level. In 2009, through the passage of the Climate Change Act, the Climate Change Commission was created, and the Climate Change Commission is the sole policy-making body of government in terms of climate change efforts. So the intention is really to hand this over to these agencies. However, prior to this, it is imperative for the joint program to determine first what is the practicality or utility of consolidating these sectoral M&E systems into one national framework, taking into consideration that this can be utilized or can be used as reference by the Climate Change Commission that is tasked to really oversee all of the climate change efforts of government. Also, should we find utility and practicality in terms of having this framework, what is then the concrete steps towards developing a unified climate change adaptation M&E system? So that is the challenge we pose to everyone, and we hope we can be able to generate as much as inputs from everyone, and we would welcome your recommendations on how we can find a solution to this challenge. So thank you for your time, and now I give back the floor to Saria.
That was a very thorough introduction to your challenge. We'll now turn over to Patricia and Olga to demonstrate how BetterEvaluation may be able to help with your challenge. Patricia?
Thank you. Thank you very much, May and Roy, for the terrific explanation of the challenge that you're facing. And what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about the BetterEvaluation project, and Olga will also talk about how we are developing that material, and to talk about how BetterEvaluation could both potentially contribute to finding out some answers to this challenge, but also be a way to document then the answers that emerge from these sorts of processes. So BetterEvaluation is an international collaborative project which aims to enhance evaluation practice by sharing information about methods. So we have a website which we're currently in beta phase, but around that is a community. And I want to talk about those two very carefully because it is more than a website. The website is actually very important. It has information about how to choose and implement evaluation methods, and it will have descriptions, examples, guides, and tools and links to these different types of methods. But surrounding that is a community that co-creates the content, that documents and shares, both shares examples of their own work, shares their comments and their experiences using different methods, engages in some research and development around particular challenges or particular methods, and engages in events such as the challenge process that Olga will describe to you and this webinar itself. So the Better Evaluation project is based really on a conundrum that we have. On the one hand, there are many evaluation methods, but there's sometimes not the right sort of information about them. If you go to Wikipedia, for example, you'll find this confusing alphabetical list of methods, which doesn't actually help you find which one to use and which one to use in which circumstances. And there's also a lot of advocacy about the primacy of particular methods that perhaps doesn't take into account sufficiently the context in which you're using those. So when we're talking about choosing methods, we're not talking about which one method to use. We're talking about which combination of methods in a particular situation, and we want to support people to be able to make those choices and also to implement them well and to share their experiences about that implementation. So it is a collaboration between evaluation practitioners, evaluation managers and commissioners, people who are doing research on methods, people who are doing training on methods. Where we are at the moment is in this beta phase where we're working with beta partners and R&D partners to not just test the website but actually develop the material, and this challenge process is part of that, and we'll be launching in September and going on to ongoing development. Better Evaluation has three key features I want to discuss with you today, and I'm going to talk briefly about these first two. One is it has built into it support to navigate the options. There is no use giving people a great long laundry list or telephone list of methods. I think we're just getting a bit of noise. Thanks. The second big issue is that we are trying to show the range of methods and including some spotlight on less well-known methods. And we're committed, thirdly, we're committed to this co-creation by the mix of people. So in terms of the support to navigate options, the website begins where people are, recognising that people will come to it with quite different needs. There's a set of support for people who are trying to plan a whole evaluation that takes them through the whole process of identifying the purpose and the resources and producing both a brief that they might then get some technical assistance around, or working through to actually develop the whole evaluation plan. We have support where people have a particular problem. They have most of the evaluation in place, but they have a particular part of it where they know they need to either have some additional methods or they're not sure which methods to use, and that helps them to focus on a particular evaluation task. You can also come into it looking for a particular method. So if you're interested in propensity scores or most significant change or bubble graphs, you can find information about that and find what other people have said about their experiences in using them. So the metaphor is a bit like the website TripAdvisor, where you can not only find information about hotels but see what other people say about using them and what their recommendations are. And finally, we have facility to connect to other people who have used a particular method and who are willing to share their experiences privately about it, to links to discussions, events and frequently asked questions. The other way in which we provide support to help people to navigate the options is by classifying the methods into different components of evaluation. So when we do an evaluation and we choose methods, we don't just choose one method. In fact, what we need is a combination of methods that address all the different tasks involved in evaluation. So what we've done is to develop this framework that I'll just go through briefly because we'll revisit this in terms of the challenge. At the beginning we have a set of tasks around managing the evaluation, deciding what it's about, who will control it, who will conduct it, and what the standards for good quality and ethical evaluation will be. Then we have two components that we often work on together, defining what it is we're evaluating and engaging and framing people in the evaluation and framing up the evaluation. So here we define what's being evaluated. We often develop a theory of change. We identify who's going to be using this and we try to engage them in the process. We negotiate what the evaluation questions will be. We identify the values underpinning the evaluation and we clarify the reporting requirements. When the answers are needed is a critical framing of the evaluation. The next two around describe and understand causes are also often done at the same time. This is where we collect data to both understand what's going on and also understand why it's going on, and particularly understanding what contribution our policies and programs have made to the outcomes and the impacts. The last two are what we do with this data. We have methods around synthesizing and valuing our data, bringing together the data and making overall judgments about whether something is better or worse than it was, better or worse than alternatives, whether it's sufficiently satisfactory to continue or to be considered to be satisfactory. And we have methods for reporting and for supporting use. And these methods are not something we start thinking about at the end. They should be part of our evaluation plan from the beginning. And we have a range of methods that we can look at for any evaluation. And obviously this is a key part of this challenge. The second key feature of BetterEvaluation is the way it spotlights less well-known methods. What I've got here is an example around this task of identifying and negotiating values. We know that the values in an evaluation are important. What would success look like in terms of results, in terms of outcomes, in terms of processes, in terms of who gets the benefits, in terms of who pays the costs. And yet often this is not explored explicitly. So we've been working to gather together methods that help to both identify the values that different stakeholders bring about outcomes, processes and the distribution of benefits, but also ways to negotiate between them. So this is an example of where BetterEvaluation will certainly have standard methods in there, but we'll also focus on areas where the information is often really scattered. So now I'm going to pass over to Olga, who's going to talk us through the third key feature, which is about the co-creation.
Thank you. Greetings to everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here with you. So as Patricia mentioned, BetterEvaluation is about community learning as much as it is about existing expertise. The users of the website include academics, practitioners, evaluators, donors, and many other groups of people. So BetterEvaluation provides a platform for all to get information, share resources and experiences, help each other in answering common questions, and jointly look for solutions using such venues as conferences, events, and also via online means of communication. And today's webinar and my challenge demonstrate the essence of such collaboration, drawing on experience and expertise from around the world. In addition to the general evaluation methods and approaches, BetterEvaluation builds connections with development practitioners via research and design in thematic areas. Next slide, please. Thematic content aims at grounding scientific evaluation in practical issues that development practitioners are faced with every day. It also aims at deepening the thematic content in each of the areas represented on BetterEvaluation, and currently we are exploring capacity development and climate change adaptation and mitigation evaluation areas. And also in collaboration with other organizations and communities such as CCAM Community of Practice. And here BetterEvaluation users can also learn and extract learning from other sectors as well. There are a few areas in which we have been developing thematic content. First of all, there is an introductory page that outlines the main issues related to climate change adaptation and mitigation evaluation field and refers to the main frameworks that exist today. Secondly, we have conducted a review of literature and compiled a library of resources which will be growing further with contributions from BetterEvaluation community. And we also conducted a review of existing impact evaluations in climate change adaptation field, which is, as we know, just emerging, and put together a concept note for further research and development, which will be explored together, hopefully, with CCAM members. And next slide, please. Another way of connecting BetterEvaluation with practice in development is via the process of requests for challenges. This is how we actually engaged with Mine and Roy in the first place. The challenges we have gathered from the field represent any component of evaluation and provide direction for deeper exploration by the community and also experts. And again, the RC process strengthens the links between practitioners and scientists and reinforce community exchange and learning. And that happens via the scheme that is shown on the next slide. There are 3 scenarios on how we approach the challenges. Scenario A is if a response to the challenge that we received is easily identified by the BetterEvaluation team, then we review the challenge internally and respond to the author. If the response needs additional input like this challenge today, we reach to outside experts and develop a response together and then submit it to the author. And if we face a very complex challenge, and there are quite a few of them these days, we reach to outside experts, and again we don't find the solutions. We then take this challenge to conferences, to more R&D projects to investigate together as a community and find a response to this challenge. So then the responses are processed for publishing on the BetterEvaluation website so everybody can have access to them, and also our community further refines the response and contributes more information. So that's it for me, and I pass it on back to Patricia.
Thanks, Olga. I'm very keen to hear people's thoughts on this challenge, so I'm just very briefly going to just highlight some of the areas that we're seeing connections between this challenge and the BetterEvaluation site and the collection of methods. And it's important to bear in mind that the group has the organisation who've been wrestling with this challenge, and there's a number of people involved in this issue, have had to work through all of these issues. They've already done work on identifying the purposes of this these indicator systems and how they're going to be used. They've already thought about some of the issues in terms of their reporting requirements. They've done a lot of work already on the indicators and measures. And getting specialist technical advice in terms of that. So some of the issues that they're particularly looking at now is how do we gather these together, and how do we report these in ways that make them commensurate. So some of the areas that we've started finding information about that could be useful are some projects that have been looking at how we aggregate and present and then also value these climate change impacts. For example, this report from Vivid Economics, which looks at particularly some of the issues in terms of trying to find a common metric using health-adjusted life years, whether they're quality-adjusted, the QALYs, or the disability-adjusted, to start to get some common metric to be able to look across different types of sectors and different types of impacts. And also some of the approaches to developing dashboards that might be useful. So what BetterEvaluation can do is to both have some material there to respond to the challenge, but also be a way to gather together the information that comes out of events such as this. So I'm keen to turn back to the group and hear about your comments on this and suggestions for the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And now, as she mentioned, we are quite keen to hear your feedback. Again, we're putting forward on your screen the central challenge questions. Again, they are: what is the practicality of consolidating sectoral M&E systems into a national framework? And secondly, what are the concrete steps towards developing this national framework? A few questions that have come in advance to the webinar. Maya, I'd like to turn your attention to a question that we received from Dr. Leo. What he asks is that he's quite familiar with the challenge and wants to understand more clearly what the role of the Climate Change Commission has been in the program. Were they the lead agency in accepting, reviewing, consolidating, and integrating the results of the study to improve the database? Could you respond, please?
Yeah, thank you, Saria, for that. The Climate Change Commission, thank you as well, Leo, for posing the question. Just briefly, when the program was created or developed and implemented back in 2008, late 2008 and early 2009, at that time the Climate Change Commission was not yet created because of the passage of the Climate Change Act. We now have, the government now has a sole policy-making body for climate change. However, as we are implementing the program, the Climate Change Commission really is the main target agency for all of these outputs of the program. Not only the M&E system, but also several climate risk reduction tools, capacity assessment methodologies, and even the Philippine climate scenario. So in terms of the involvement of Climate Change Commission, presently they are now a member of the program management committee of the joint program, wherein they are now actively participating and involved in the providing policy directions as well as guidance for the implementation of the program. Second is that independently, apart from their participation in the management committee, the program is also now moving forward in terms of engaging several advocacy efforts for the Climate Change Commission, not only in terms of its activities moving forward, some of its priority legislations on climate change, but also providing technical assistance as well as financial support to these activities. One of which is that we are also proposing to the Commission to be involved in their consultations on the several climate change adaptation vulnerability assessment tools that are now emerging in the country. So together with some of our outputs, we are going to present this to the Climate Change Commission, and hopefully this can be circulated and presented to a bigger group. So those are the current efforts of the program and its linkage with the Climate Change Commission. I hope that I was able to respond to the question.
I think that gives us a great...
Saria?
Yes. Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I think that would be an answer that Leo would be interested in hearing. I'd like to turn over to Roy. I believe he has a question related to the process in developing the framework. Roy?
Good morning. How are you? Hello?
Roy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. What is your question for Mai?
Okay, good. Yes. Although I was part of, I partnered with Mai in developing the RFC, I still would like to ask her why we have the sectoral M&E systems first before the national framework. The process seems to be in reverse. No? Usually you develop first the national framework and then you go down to the sectoral systems. So any background information on that?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roy, for that question. Yeah, I do agree that there are the step is to come up first with the national framework and then thresh out the details into sectoral levels. But as the strategy of the program really is, it focused more on the priority vulnerable sectors that have been identified as most vulnerable to climate change. So it was our first track was really to, apart from the M&E systems, we also developed, as I mentioned earlier, climate risk reduction tools such as VNA or Vulnerability and Adaptation Assessment tools, impact assessment tools, a collection or a compendium of adaptation options were developed for each of these sectors. However, when we've already completed all of these outputs, it was the next step was for us to now think about, is it even practical to merge all of these sectors into one unified M&E system? Again, at that time, when the project was conceptualized, there was no national framework to speak of, because at that time there was really no policy directive in terms of climate change. It was really fortunate that in 2009 the passage of the Climate Change Act was passed, so that created the policy environment for climate change. So now we're working our way back. But again, I would like to note to everyone that the strategy of the joint program is really to provide all our relevant sectoral agencies as well as the Climate Change Commission options on how to implement climate change programs and projects, building on the experience of the joint program in terms of its output. So we are not really keen on prescribing what we have produced, but rather presenting it to our sector agencies and of course the Climate Change Commission for reference, and to allow our agencies and the Commission to determine its utility as well as how it can be utilized in terms of their operations as well as consistent with their mandate. So it's a bit of the other way around, but again, at the end of the day, it depends on, well, the strategy in terms of climate change adaptation, whether one can move forward first with the national and then detail it out, or as we have done, go first to the sectoral level and then move our way up to coming up with a national framework. So thank you.
Thank you, Mai. I will check in the audience. Don't know that we have any other questions raised. I'm looking. If anyone does, please either type your question in the question log, or please click on the hand icon so that we can call on you. In the meantime, are there other thoughts as we process the requirements in moving forward? Patricia, I believe that you had a few ideas or some questions that may help my process. Would you please share with us your thoughts? Patricia, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm sorry, I just missed my name when you were
no
asking
problem.
us. I was stepping backwards for the others. So I'm really struck by Roy's question, and I think it's a very good question about in evaluation, when we have very complicated interventions that bring together lots of different initiatives. There is a great tension between trying to have something that makes sense of the whole, particularly for people who are having to make decisions across all of it in terms of priorities, people who are trying to, I imagine that the Climate Commission and the people who will be informed by it needs to be able to say things like, we're doing really well in water, but we've got a problem in health. They need to be able to look across the different sectors, so there is a need for that. But it's not the place that you can start, because climate change exemplifies these types of programs where you are bringing together very many different discipline areas and sectors. So you have tremendous need for technical expertise in these specific areas, and that's fine. We know how to do that, but or we're working on developing that expertise. But how do we then talk across the sectors? How do we make these knowledgeable to people? I mean, people who are using different types of measures and different types of scales don't necessarily know things about those that others who are working in the area know about. So, for example, the earthquake, the Richter scale of earthquake damage is not a simple linear scale. So, a factor of 4 is not twice as big as a factor of 2. Now, unless you're working in that area, you might not understand that, and when that sort of data is put onto a dashboard, you might interpret it wrongly. So I think it is a real challenge that we have here about how do we cross these disciplinary boundaries in ways that make it easy for people in those different sectors to understand, but also the people who we're trying to communicate with. So I guess my interest would be to go to look for how this has been done, not only in climate change initiatives and programs, but also in other areas where they've had complex and very complicated multi-sectoral interventions. So perhaps some of the community development, community health areas that have really crossed physical infrastructure, social capital, physical capital, and health issues, might have had some similar issues that we might be able to learn from. So I'm interested, in terms of that, is what is your timescale now for trying to bring together this national framework?
Thank you, Patricia. The joint program is going to end by the end of the year. So we have now about 6 months to at least come up with the general framework, or at least an idea on how to operationalize this and discuss this to our target agencies. So it's a bit of a short time, but I think the benefit of the program is that rather the benefit of the Philippine government right now is that, given that there is a Climate Change Commission, they are now moving forward with developing their National Climate Change Action Plan. And the action plan also would have its attendant monitoring and evaluation system, of course, to determine how the programs as well as the projects integrated in the action plan are progressing, or to determine its impact. So what we would like to do now is discuss further our proposed action in terms of consolidating all of our M&E systems into a national framework together with the Climate Change Commission, and see how this can serve as an input to their current efforts in terms of the National Climate Change Action Plan, as well as to the National Strategic Framework for Climate Change. So that is our track. And what in terms of the program right now, what we would like to do before sitting down and discussing this with the Commission as well as with our sector agencies is first to settle among ourselves what are the advantages. But I think based on the discussion right now, there is really the utility of having a national framework. But our next step is really what are the concrete actionables that we should do in terms of at least making a recommendation to our target agencies on how to consolidate and unify this into one framework. So that is how, well, at least I am envisioning what we are going to do. And again, I would like to invite everyone to give their inputs as well as if you have similar experiences to share it with us.
Thank you, Mai. We do have a question from the audience, I think, that may help you get the feedback that you're looking for. Kurt, I see that your hand is raised. Would you please share your question?
Yes, thank you, Surya. And I'm not so sure I'm going to be able to help here. I have some more questions for Mai and also for Patricia and Kurt from PACT. First of all, Mai, in what you were presenting, it was not clear whether the main indicators that have been developed or being developed are just looking at change, climate change, or whether it's looking at desired change, because these are obviously two different things, and that it will obviously, whether you're just looking at change or whether you're looking at desired change, will ultimately impact the types of actions that are being taken. So that was one, because it just wasn't clear in your presentation. The second was in the framework and then the M&E systems. It would be good to hear what type of feedback loops and mechanisms for feedback, and feedback to who in order to do what, and how that might actually influence and change the national framework over time, because the framework is in place, but I would imagine based on the M&E framework that is in place, it could actually change the framework itself, the higher meta-level framework, and then what type of processes are in place to be able to make sure that that feedback is there. The third has to do with joint indicators. This is something that Patricia brought up, and that is just not coordinating between the different sectors, but also, as we know, some impact that there will be on health will be brought about because of water or because of forestry or because of agriculture, for example. And I was wondering whether within this project you grappled with joint indicators, not just sector-specific indicators. And lastly, this question is really for Mai and also for Patricia. And that is there anything that you think within this particular development of a framework which is unique to climate change? Because when I look at what the process you went through, and it seems to me that it's similar process that you could do around many different types of frameworks, M&E frameworks, but perhaps there is something unique regarding the area of climate change that would be nice to hear what makes it more challenging, perhaps, because it is trying to address climate change compared to other frameworks. That's it.
Great questions.
Yeah. Hello.
Where do we start? Where do we start? Mai, do you want to pick up some of those questions particularly?
Yeah, I think I can. I will respond to the first two questions first,
okay,
and then move forward. And within there were four questions that I was able to pick up. Okay, for the first question regarding was the M&E system looking at change, or was it also looking at the desired change? for our 5 sector M&E systems, some of them looked at the change in terms of physical impacts, in terms of temperature increase, rainfall frequency, rainfall levels. Those were the kind of changes that were being monitored. For some sector M&E systems, particularly for, if I'm correct, health, it also looked at what is the desired change. Would that mean an increase, a decrease in the incidence of diseases, a decrease in, of course, one of the indicators was DALYs, so there was also efforts to do that. But if it varied among the sectoral M&E systems. What we would like to see is that the national framework would provide both information. Provide information on the change in terms of both at the physical level, the physical impacts of climate change, sectoral level, and moving up to even to the organizational level, but at the same time provide indicators to determine what are the progress towards achieving a desired level, a desired, as you mentioned, desired change. So that is what we want to do with the unified national framework. So that's my response for question number 1. In terms of the question on the feedback system, I think my understanding of the question is that first, who are the audience for the M&E system that's going to be developed? As the program really is focusing on institutions, the main users of the M&E system is the sector agencies. The information would be gathered in terms of the data requirements of the system would be coming from the field level. As it feeds into their M&E system, this would be utilized to provide information as well as guidance in terms of program implementation, policy formulation, as well as decision making for our management, senior management of these agencies, and as well as all other technical staff of the various sector agencies. So that is what we're going to utilize with the M&E system. And as this is consolidated either by the Climate Change Commission, which is the national and the sole policy-making body, the intention is that the CCC should they use the M&E system, the unified M&E system, would serve as inputs to their policy-making functions, as well as to feed also other agencies of the information that is generated by this M&E system. So I think, Patricia, maybe you can also answer question number 3 about the joint indicators and what is really unique to climate change.
Yeah, this is a terrific question because, you know, one of the premises underpinning better evaluation is that when we're looking at evaluation, we want to learn from that particular sector or issue that there are some specific questions about that specific issues, but we can often learn across from other sectors that are wrestling with similar issues. And so some of the features about evaluation of climate change programs, both mitigation and adaptation, that are similar to some other areas is about working in a very open and complex system where we have discontinuous change and where we have long-term impacts in many cases, so that we have. If you think of the sort of classic logic model where you make some changes and you see what effect you're making, and we have a feedback loop and we can make some more changes, it's very problematic, particularly when we have discontinuous change, many other factors affecting it, and often long lead times before we see the results of our actions. Those are not unique to climate change, but I think they are a particular feature of it. And I think the other aspects for climate change is obviously the critical importance of it, that really does cross so many sectors. A particular feature is the political nature of it and the dissent around it, which puts it in a different position. And the other particular area, I think, is this notion about the sorts of behaviours that we're trying to create are often around resilience. So they're not about a particular response to a particular hazard. They're actually about developing capacities around to be able to respond to discontinuous change and increased variability. So with PACT, we're working around both climate change, mitigation and adaptation, but also around capacity development, and I think those two fit really well in terms of where that goes. I'm sorry we can't explore this now in this webinar, but we're very keen to continue this conversation. And Saria, if you could just show the next slide. It shows the two.
Yes, that's an excellent segue, Patricia. Although before we close, there is one more question from the audience. One of our C-Change members, Emma, has written a question directed to Mai. She writes, are you only working with government agencies in the Philippines? Have you considered working or getting participation from other non-governmental agencies involved with climate change, as well as in coming up with a national framework? Mai, is this a question that you've also considered?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Emma, for that question. Right now, in terms of the program, our main targets are the national government agencies. However, in one of our components, particularly on capacity assessment, we've also gotten involved the civil society organization and some, particularly on education. So, but in terms of the M&E system or the national framework, M&E framework, our track is that, again, the M&E frameworks are work in progress. We've already developed this, and now we are going to hand it over to our sector agencies. That's the one track, and the next track is to also offer it as reference or something to be considered by the Climate Change Commission. Our intention is that, of course, the involvement of stakeholders in the development of any plan or even program, and including an M&E framework such as this, would involve the participation of our civil society. That is the same development process that we have agreed upon with our sector agencies, and for the Climate Change Commission, I think that is one of their key strategies. So we are ensured that beyond the project life, should this M&E framework either at the sectoral level and hopefully at the national level will be adopted or considered by our sector agencies and the Climate Change Commission, the participation of our civil society organizations would be part and parcel of its development and of course the finalization. Saria?
Yes, thank you very much, Mai. And as
hello,
we would want to make sure that everyone knows that this webinar is an introduction to how we would recommend Mai and her team to address the challenge in developing a national framework, and also an introduction to better evaluation and how we may use that resource as we encounter other similar challenges and other challenges that are at all encountered in the field. I'd like to thank everyone for your patience with our technical difficulties, a slight delay in starting, but I do appreciate seeing still a significant number of participants still on the line. In respect for your time, I will go ahead and wrap up our session for today. As Patricia mentioned, we will continue this discussion online, betterevaluation.org, ccangecop.org. Please visit these sites for more information. If you have other thoughts, other suggestions, please visit either one of these to share your feedback. Thanks again, Mai and Roy, for participating, sharing with us your challenge, developing ways for us to understand how the audience and everyone that is involved in both platforms can assist. Patricia and Olga, thank you also for introducing us to BetterEvaluation. What I'd like to do also is to thank Rockefeller for supporting the COP in our activities. It is with their support that this webinar is possible. Once again, we do appreciate your time in joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day or evening. Thank you so much.